Good morning and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show, kicking off your morning with hobby chat. I think that's what we say, isn't it? I'm OT and today I'm joined by Mare.
Hello everyone, good morning.
And we're going to be talking about Before You Buy Iron Hills. Now, I think this is actually the final Dwarf Army we're going to be doing because we've done all the other ones now, I think. So,
Have we done Erebor Reclaimed?
Are we going to really do that one separately? All right, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe okay, I'm going to eat my words. We need more content.
I'll be doing that one alone, I have a feeling.
It's a solo operation. But yeah, this is kind of one of the factions that came out during the Hobbit army book, and I don't think there was necessarily power creep, but there were some pretty cool and new things that got added to Iron Hills compared to maybe some of the older dwarf factions.
Yeah, I think they deserve it in their own way in that they're a bit pared down. They're like a bit more of a concentrated level of dwarf.
Yeah.
In that they're even more well armored, but there's even less variation.
Yeah, they are just like ultra dwarves, aren't they? They are just like peak dwarf power. Yeah, so in order to play this, you're just going to need the rules manual and the Armies of the Hobbit. You could, I guess, technically, they have a Legendary Legion, don't they? Defenders of Erebor or something that came out in Defense of the North?
Yeah.
Which you could drop them in, I guess, but I don't technically know if that's Iron Hills or Erebor Reclaimed, so I might drop that in here.
I think it's... You know what? I actually don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, citation needed. In terms of the overview then, they're just dwarves again, but more. So they are perhaps even higher defense than some of the other factions we've looked at. We'll talk maybe more about that in the rules section later on. But you're getting a lot of strength 4 across the army. I think everything's fight 4 at least, a lot of fight 5 on the heroes, things like that. They actually get pretty decent shooting, and unusually for dwarves, they get some cavalry in there as well, which is nice with the goat riders.
True, and it's worth noting that we talked about the dwarf profile before, and for me it's the sweet spot, the fight 4, the strength 4, D7. So even strength 4 is needing 6s against it. They can go D8 obviously if they're shield walling. Yep. So. Pretty crazy. Yeah, they're very strong for frontline troops and not too expensive either.
Yeah. In terms of like ease of collection painting, it's all quite a new set of releases, apart from Murin and Dra, who maybe we'll talk about in a second. But I think it should all hopefully either be in stock or in stock quite soon. I think it should all still be in production. I've put ease of collection and painting as easy. I think, again, like, it doesn't have to be easy, but I think if you do just want to get them on the table, you could just do a lot of silver, a bit of gold, and get them on the table quite quickly. Like, it doesn't have to be the most complicated paint job in the world. In terms of difficulty to play, I think I've taken this to one tournament and I had some practice games with it, so I have a huge amount of experience with it, but I think on the whole, it's kind of like a medium difficulty list. Like, there are some aspects of the army that are quite forgiving, but also a lot of the skill with dwarves is things like positioning and stuff like that, because you have that reduced mobility. So there is definitely some skill in like setting up your army in the right place and, you know, using the crossbows, using the cavalry and things like that.
Yeah, they're just very nice to play, I think, overall. They're quite forgiving as well. If you get yourself in a bit of trouble or you do the wrong thing, the high defense is very forgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I put this point sweet spot as mid. I think that's probably pretty fair. I think like at lower points, it's still fine. Like, you might not be getting Dane in, you might just be getting like an Iron Hills captain, but Iron Hills captains are still really good. Like, that's definitely not a problem. But I think in that sort of, I'd say 500 to 700 area, I feel like is where you're getting like perhaps the optimum value from the list.
Yeah, I think maybe everything above that, you'll be playing against armies that have a lot of toys and a lot of magic or abilities that the dwarves might struggle against. And really for Iron Hills anyway, once you scale up to above 700 points, you're basically just scaling up what you probably already have.
Yeah.
Probably, I mean, you're going to have Dane, you're going to have a captain, you're going to have a ballista probably around 700. Anything above that, yeah, it's going to be just more of the same, and that's not necessarily good.
Yeah. Yeah. Bit like Goblin Town, I guess, in that aspect, I
Yeah, I
suppose.
was
Like
just thinking about that.
it's-
It doesn't scale very well.
yeah. Yeah.
No.
You can't do necessarily cooler stuff. You can just do more. I mean, to be fair, it's still very good, right? Like you're still getting lots of cool stuff, but you're not getting the extra toys and things like that. That I don't know, maybe like Amar or something like that will be bringing in at higher points levels.
Yes, exactly.
Cost to collect is going to be high. Like pretty much the whole sort of collection of models is the expert range or old Forge World resin. And it's all very, very expensive. They have started doing some multi-packs and stuff like that, which have made it slightly less expensive. But, you know, things like the Iron Hills Chariot come in at like, I think 125 or 130 quid. So you're going to struggle I guess if you just want to run lots of basic stuff, it's maybe not too bad. But as soon as you start adding in like the Ballista and the Chariot and things like that, it's going to get very, very expensive.
Yeah, I think if you're starting off, you're probably not going to be going for a chariot, thankfully. So yeah, to
Yeah.
start, I think because a box will get you quite far, weirdly, in
Yeah.
points. So it might not be too bad because they are fairly expensive points wise. But how
Yeah, I
does
suppose
it?
that's true.
Did you rank it in your cost effective
So
sheet?
it's in the top third. It's not right at the top. The multi packs they've done. So for 65 quid, you would get, I think it's 12 warriors with spear, a banner, and a captain, and that really helps bring the cost down because you do get, you know, the heroes and the hero and the banner in there as well. So it does make it a bit more affordable. But as soon as you start to add it, it's the crossbows as well. The crossbows are expensive in their sort of smaller pack and stuff like that. So it can get expensive as you start to add those in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In terms of competitive viability, I feel like I have no data to back this up, but you don't see it a whole lot at tournaments. Maybe it is just because it's a little bit expensive. But like it's definitely not a bad faction, but I don't think it's maybe at the very top of the sort of competitive scale.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. We have seen its podium in some tournaments. If you look on the GBHL website with their spreadsheet of lists that have won things, they have won a few, but they're not consistently podiuming. I think players that are very good with them probably do fairly well, and they are quite forgiving. But they are probably a mid slash above mid kind of list.
Yeah. Cool. Right, let's talk about army bonus and alliances. The army bonus is really good, and I think if you are able to get it to go off, it's arguably one of the better army bonuses out there. So first and foremost, irrespective of whether or not you have Dane, you're getting +or -1 to your deployment and reinforcement rolls, which is just really nice. And again, as we mentioned earlier, because one of the vulnerabilities of this army is your maneuverability, if you're able to choose where you're deploying, that is huge. And like, especially if you're coming on in like Maelstrom and you can have, you know, some impact on that, like, or reinforcements, that's really nice and lets you mitigate some of that disadvantage.
Yeah, and some tournaments even, I think we've been to a couple, or at least seen a couple where I think one of them was literally every game will be Maelstrom deployment.
That was the one I went to, and I took Iron Hills, and I thought I was being really smart, and then everyone else bought fucking Rangers and Gondor with Madril and all that stuff, and it was just like, oh yeah, actually, it's not as advantageous as I was hoping.
No, but well, fair enough. I mean, I think it definitely helps them, and
Yeah,
I mean, if you're taking Iron Hills, you're probably taking Dane, so
yeah,
having 4+ Master of Battle is really good as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean that second bit of it is
That's
really
the main
good.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like I think like Dane is already a very, very, very good hero without it, and with it he becomes pretty scary. Like, I think that, yeah, because it's a psychological effect as well. Like your opponent is just much less likely to cool moves or stuff like that Dane's going to get off for free. And like also because he's got that fight 6, I suspect we'll come on to this in a second. Like they might have to strike into him, in which case he'll be striking back, and then they're just looking for like a 50 fit. Well, they're looking for the roll off to go in their favor, basically. So yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's very strong.
In terms of alliances, again, pretty good. The green with Army of Thor, I have a slight issue with, but it's what I took to the tournament, and it was actually pretty good. So yeah, not mad at that. Halls of Thranduil's pretty nice, and Survivors also good. Like, I think those are all just pretty useful alliances to have, and they all offer something a bit different. So if you were looking to ally this while keeping your army bonus, it's pretty powerful.
I wonder if it's actually the most allied faction.
Maybe.
Because I feel like, or rather, like the most allied to.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's probably Lake Town, but
Mm.
something like I just think those other factions offer so much.
Yeah.
You've
And
got
also, like, if you can just Green Alliance Dane in by himself, like that, in some ways, that's enough. Like, it's like armies that used to drop in Thorin on Goat for those free heroic combats and stuff like that from Erebor Acclaimed. Like, if you can just get that one really powerful model in, it could do a lot of work.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, bringing that into Iron Hills is going to be really strong. Then bringing, I think there is something to be said about bringing Thranduil in. He's really good. I don't know if he synergizes as well when you've got two massive heroes like that, but you've got Lake Town as well, so you can have lots of bows and cheaper models to actually move about. I think they all offer something which is really nice.
And then bunch of convenience, pretty standard. I think you'd be much less likely to convenient it, because I think it takes away a lot of why you would bring this. But like, yeah, you can get Army of Lake Town, Erebor Acclaimed, Fangorn, Lothlorien, Eagles, Radagast Alliance, Rivendell, Thorin's Company, and White Council. Like, I think all of those, like, if I was to see that convenient, I'd be like, okay, I guess that's maybe a thing. But like, I think those historical ones would be really hard to overlook.
Yeah, definitely, I agree, because then you're keeping the bonus as well.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk about the heroes. So we've kind of alluded to him already, but we've got Dane. I mean, he's fight 6, strength 5, burly, D8, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 7. Courage 7, fuck me. And he's fearless anyway, so it doesn't matter. 3. He's got also so many heroics: resolve, march, strike, strength, challenge. To be fair, I think only a couple of those are actually useful, but like, him having march and strike is really nice. You can put him on the board for the knockdown, and it's strength 4, D6 with a couple of wounds. He's burly, he's fearless. It's all there. It's like, for 160 points mounted. Good lord.
He's really good. And I think it's good that he's that good and cost effective, because I mean, he's really all Iron Hills have. You do have Murren and Dra, but I think they're just thrown in here because they don't really belong anywhere else. Up until the Hobbit book, they were just in Wanderers in the Wild. And then you've got the captain, which, I mean, every faction has to have a captain, more or less, otherwise, apart from Army of the Dead, because otherwise you can't take more guys. So he really is all you have. So I think it is a good thing that he is a centerpiece for the army, and he is very, very good.
Yeah. And like, special rules, the fearless bubble, and like, I think the one downside is his fiery temper. That means he has to charge, but also I think a lot of the time you would be looking to charge anyway. So I don't think, and like, it's also nice that it's once you've killed an enemy model, so it's not the whole game. It's just once you're like, into the thick of it, as it were, you have to charge. So I think that's probably fairly manageable. He causes terror on the charge. And he can headbutt and stuff like that as well, which I think is maybe a bit niche, because like, if you're failing to kill an opponent with Dane, I think you're maybe doing something wrong. I mean, he's 3 attack. Like, if
it's for heroes, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. But if he knocks you down 4 attacks on the charge with Burley, like I don't actually know what would really survive that. Anyway, maybe Sauron, but yeah, it's not bad.
It's a bit of flavour, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice. I guess it's nice that it's in there, even if it might not happen that often. I think Murin and Dra are just slightly awkward in this list. Like,
They're quite expensive as well.
yeah, I mean, it's the Eladon and Elrahir thing. Whereas I think if each of these guys was 70 and they were a hero of fortitude,
Yeah.
it's a very different proposition. But because you have to take them both, and you don't get the warband space as a result, that you would if you had them both, it's maybe not as good. I think individually they're fine. Like I think Murin's pretty solid, and he gets a nice bonus against Uruks and goblins and orcs as well. And he gets strike, and he's got 3 might. Like it's not bad. And Dra's similar. He can shoot twice with that dwarf bow at strength 3, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I just don't think it's. I mean, when you compare them to Dane or even to the captain, to be honest, I think maybe they're just slightly underwhelming.
I agree. I think you'd probably take. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anyone take them. I mean, I've got the models and I've never used them. Although then again, I've never used Iron Hills. But let's not get into that.
Iron Hills captain. These are a weird
Expensive.
profile. They're expensive. They are good for their expense. I will say that. Like, chuck them on a goat, and on the charge, they're getting like 3 attacks with the knockdown. And then they do have the war spear, which you can use as a lance. So suddenly, like, their killing power is pretty crazy. They also have Master of Battle, which it is on a 5+, admittedly, so only going off a third of the time, but it is still a very nice thing to have, and again will have an impact on like the way your opponent plays. I think like just having that Master of Battle means that even if you only take like 1 or 2 heroic actions a game, that's still a really big deal. Like just saving that might point that you otherwise might have to use is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably almost always mounting them on a war goat, right? And with a war spear, because that just, I mean, that's scary. But then he's 90 points, so you're looking at basically Legolas or Gimli from Fellowship.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
But I mean, arguably, I think maybe he might. I think he might be worth it when you consider, Gimli's is some. I mean, he'd be the same points level from Fellowship. On the charge, this guy's going to have 3 attacks. He's already it'd be D8, right? Or is he D7?
Yeah, they're D8.
So he's D8. He's +1 to wound, same as Gimli would if he was 2-handing. Assuming that you've charged. And he gets knocked down. And he's movement 8.
Yeah.
Otherwise, obviously, he's only fight 5 and doesn't have strike. But he's got March, which for dwarves is pretty useful.
Pretty essential, yeah. Also, like, you don't have to mount them. You can just shield wall them, and then if they're surrounded by the other Iron Hills dwarves, they go to D9 and stuff like that. Like, I don't think that's maybe the optimum way to do it, but I think also if you've got a big infantry block and you just want to be marching with them, it's no bad thing, and they definitely could still do a job while they're on foot. But yeah, I think that the power of them being mounted is a pretty big deal. Warriors. The humble Iron Hills warrior, 11 points basic, which is quite expensive. The fact that the cheapest model in your army is 11 points is pretty crazy. I think a lot of the time you're going to be giving them a spear, particularly as that seems to be
like that.
Yeah, because I don't think realistically a lot of the time you're going to bother swapping the shield for the Mattock. Like, it's so Mattock's 200 weapon that can bash and pierce, which is nice, but it costs you the shield, and I think having that D7 is a big deal. So I don't think it's worth throwing that away.
I'm on a slightly differing opinion to that because I've played against it. I was using Thorin's company,
right,
and obviously, so my opponent was playing Iron Hills with Dane, and he had mainly shield wall dwarves with spears.
Yeah,
but he also had, I think, for every like 8 or so dudes, he had a Mattock, and just when he had the numbers on a guy, and then he threw in a guy with a Mattock who could 2-handed pierce.
Yeah.
Most of my guys are defense 5. So suddenly he's winning on 4s +1, 3s to wound now, as
Yeah.
opposed to 5s.
Please. Yep. It's true.
So I think in certain situations where you've got the numbers advantage, especially if you're coming against bigger heroes. I know that a lot of the time when I've played Isengard and I've come against dwarves, suddenly my strength 4 doesn't matter because I'm still winning on 6s, and I really struggle to get wounds on, and that's where the berserkers come in handy because they can two-hand. If I can get the numbers advantage, then that's great. So I think you could consider maybe at slightly higher points levels where you can control or kind of zone a little bit more on the board when you've got more numbers. Obviously, I think you're going to struggle to get more numbers than your opponents. But perhaps for every 12 you take one Matic as like a utility, it could be useful.
Yep. But I think the majority of your guys are just going to be shield spear or shield. I think it's just the more reliable option. You can take crossbows as well. I think crossbows are good, and I think especially if you're able to use them to move your opponent around the board, bring them to you, whatever, it's really nice. So I think a couple of honesty crossbows in an Iron Hills list would go quite a long way. Also, like if you just want them to cap an objective or something, because I think it feels bad leaving a guy with a shield or spear behind. If you can just have one guy sitting there with his crossbow taking a couple of pot shots, like that's a fairly good use of points. Like it is 12 points admittedly, but you do need somebody to go stand on an objective, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Talk about the goat riders. 20 points is a lot of points, but they are tough and they do get some really nice bonuses on the charge. So basic warrior is fight for only D6 because they don't come with a shield. They do, however, come with a lance. The war goat is D5, which is pretty nice, and they get mountain dwellers. They also get the auto knockdown on a 5+, which I think, especially against like a big hero or something, the fact that 1/3 of the time, like you don't even have to worry about the damage they could do, you can just also knock them down, is pretty crazy.
It's no camel though, is it?
No, it's true. It's true, but they are maybe a bit tougher than camels and stuff like that. But yeah, it's. I don't think anything compares to the bullshit that camels can pull off sometimes.
But the extra movement is definitely really, really useful. The knockdown, like you said, and the war spears just gives them that extra kind of extended range that they're probably going to need against higher mobile armies.
Yeah. And like just a couple on the flanks, right, or something like that, and they're moving not quite twice as far, but significantly further than the rest of your army. So, like, if you've got a captain on a goat with some goats who are marching, they're suddenly moving 13 inches rather than the basic 5 that the rest of your guys would move or whatever. Like, it does give you a couple of options. So even though they're expensive, I think dropping 1 or 2 in is normally a fairly good idea. The ballista, not as problematic as it used to be. I think it got nerfed, didn't it? I think its points is now like 120 or something. It got a big increase. It's an interesting one. I think like it's still good, but I think it would now only be run at higher points levels. I think you would really struggle to justify fitting this in at much below like 500 to 600 points.
Yeah, you don't seem to see it taken in top lists anymore. I think the nerf maybe was a bit too aggressive. Iron Hills doesn't have the best shooting. It does have some crossbows, but I don't think you're giving that up in favor of shields and spears too much. And it just meant your opponent had to come to you a little bit more. Maybe it is worth that premium cost. I'm not sure it is. I think maybe 100 or 105 would have been fine.
Okay. Yeah, but it's got some cool rules. Like it's reliable, so that scatter is smaller, and you can reroll ones, which is quite nice. Rerolling ones to hit, so suddenly, actually, even if your shoot value is on a 4, like you're missing a comparatively quite small amount of the time, and actually, I've just realised that's now the same as the Assault on Helm's Deep armor bonus. It also always counts as having a heroic shoot, so you don't have to spend the might and things like that. Like, and it prevents enemy shooting in a sort of cone in front of it, basically, which is quite an interesting thing to have. I don't know how useful that will be, but I think it's an interesting idea, and like gives an army that maybe sometimes will be being skirmished and being shot at a sort of way to counter that.
Yeah, that brings us on, of course, to the Iron Hills champion. Iron Hills chariot / champions chariot.
Champions. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we can go through the flipping champions chariot. I'm not sure I've got that in the locker, but
No, let's not do
let's
that.
talk about the basic one. I'm not even going to attempt to try and go through all the rules to this because it is absolutely absurd. Basically, it is just a huge model with a load of attacks. Is the only way I can really think to describe it. It's fearless. It gets monstrous charge. And I personally have never seen one of these on the board. If it was up against me, I have no idea how I would go about countering this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're just about to get into Iron Hills, don't bother with this unless for some reason you really, really liked the scene that they cut out from the movie, which should be telling you something, seeing as what they left in the movie. So I'd avoid it unless you're really experienced or for some reason you're just a masochist. It's not necessary at all. You're not going to be using it unless you're playing like 800 points, I would suggest.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bonkers. Cool. I think we'll leave that for now because I'm not going to bother going through that. Let's talk about the in-game pros and cons. I think we've gone through some of these. In terms of like the negatives aspect, we talked about like the movement, you pay a premium. Weirdly, like you do end up often in dwarf armies with just quite a low might count, although I think you can again mitigate a lot of that with like Master of Battle and things like that, which is quite nice. I think you don't feel as bad calling a march with Dane as you might with other 3 might big heroes, just because you do know that you've got that Master of Battle 4+ that might come in clutch later on. So you might be more willing to spend, a couple of points of might to get that heroic march going in the early game.
That's true. I think you're probably going to burn your captain's might before that happens. But I think I mean that's probably why they all have a Master of Battle because they're just expensive, and there's no alternative to that.
Mm-hmm. It should also be noted, like very high defense across the army. The fact I think our Army of the Dead D8 with shields.
Yes.
Yeah. So like the fact that you can get basic warriors that would cost as little as 11 points up to D8 is like pretty bonkers. It's not even that hard to do. Like you just need 3 of them in base contact, and so I think often you'll see like people forming like little 3-man pods after maybe your lines have been broken, just to make sure you still get that D8. But it means that strength 4 models need, what is that, 6 by, is it just flat 6s? Yeah, it's just flat 6s.
The strength 4 is, yeah, I think.
Yeah, just flat 6s.
So it's only useful against strength 3 or strength 5, I think.
Yeah, or shooting, because strength 2 shooting needs 6s by 5s against your basic warriors.
Yeah,
and even elf bows would be 6s by 4s, which is crikey. Like I think it does just mean that right, you're halving or a thirding the number of wounds you might take compared to even like D7 models or something. Like it is pretty crazy to have that high defense on such relatively inverted commas cheap models. But yeah, you just like, if you're, as with the other dwarf armies we've talked about, if you are able to get into close combat with this army, a lot of the times you're just going to like attrition through people just because your guys are so tough. And actually, yes, they're strength 4, and unfortunately they don't base come with axes, which is, I've just realized now, perhaps part of the motivation to take the Mattock, because it does let you pierce. You only come with a sword basic, so maybe that is a thing. But like strength 4 is often going to get it done against like a D6 army or something, like wounding those guys on 5s, whereas very often they're going to be needing 6s or even 6s by 4s against you, which is pretty hard to deal with.
Yeah, I think you're right about the attrition thing. That's certainly been my experience playing against them. If you can't kind of cripple them very quickly and get numbers on them,
Mm.
if they can get one-on-ones, like you're just, I mean, the odds aren't in your favor, are they?
No.
You know, just not being able to kill them as fast as they can kill you is just going to put you on a time limit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Also, like, you will struggle a bit against magic just because you're not ever going to have much will. Like, the captain has one will, Murin and Jar have one will, Dane has three, yes, but like, you have no innate defense against magic. And actually, I think that would be one of the ways, like, if you can transfix Dane, for instance, or something, that really takes a lot of the hitting power away from this army. So, magic would definitely be a concern.
Yeah, that's true. I think magic's going to have a big effect on this.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Collecting pros and cons. Talked about these a bit. Some of the pros are it is quite a new range, which is nice. And I think it can be quite interesting to paint. Like you can do some stuff. You can do some stuff with the colors and like. While I don't think they're necessarily the most like creative sculpts in the world, I think I've definitely seen some really good paint jobs on the on some Iron Hills armies. Um, you would hope as well, like they're all in the expert range, inverted commas, which you would hope would mean higher quality sculpts. I have to say, I didn't necessarily find that when I was going through mine. Like, um, there were some bits like that clearly hadn't come out properly, and I did have to go through and do lots of clipping and like sanding bits down or whatever, which was a little bit annoying. But you do get a good level of detail and stuff like that, so that's nice.
Their spears are completely fucked, though, aren't they?
I mean, yeah, I in the con section, they're expensive. Not all the models are in production. Not all the models exist. So the Champion's Chariot, which we alluded to earlier, there is no model for that. You're gonna have to make that yourself. If for whatever reason you want to spend 500 points making a weird Champion's Chariot thing that I don't think is very good, but that's up to you. Murin and Jar out production and are very expensive secondhand. On eBay, they do go for a lot of money if their original sculpts are out there. And the fucking spears are absolute garbage.
Yeah.
Even if they are sculpted correctly, they are so long and fragile that unless you store them really carefully, they're going to get bent and they might even snap. Like it's just not good. And when as many models in
Yeah.
your army have spears as this army does, it is quite frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, all of mine, the reason it's taken me forever to actually build them is because I've cut the spears off and I've drilled a hole in their hand where I can put a 1 mil brass rod. Then I'm going to design and 3D print some spear tips. But like, I shouldn't have to fucking do
You
that
shouldn't
to
have
have
to do
some
that.
models.
And also when you're spending as much money as you are on these sculpts, like it's just not good. And
Yeah,
yeah,
the
it's
spears are so dumb. I don't.
yeah,
It was just. I think it was just an oversight for them.
yeah,
Like they just obviously didn't consider how bendy and crap they'd be.
yeah,
And they're expensive. Like
yeah.
it's. I wouldn't recommend this army to a new player, honestly. Um, and because its play style is very narrow.
Yeah.
Your a lot of the hobby elements are a pain. Um,
Hmm.
the painting you can get away with, but the building of them and the expense is a little bit off-putting. Um, and like I said, if you're getting into it from a new player perspective, you can only really play them one way, and they're quite limiting. It's not like an army where you can take it 50 different ways, like Isengard or Mordor.
Hmm.
You're just stuck with what you have. So
Yeah.
I'd say it's more for me, for example, it would be a kind of a utility army that I just sort of dip into now and then to mix things up, as opposed to, you know, I main Iron Hills and that's all I play. Said the
Hmm.
Goblin Town player who only plays Goblin Town at the moment. Um, well, I mean, I guess if you have fun with it, then maybe
Yeah,
it does
yeah.
become, because I mean,
But
Goblin Town is
also,
kind of similar in its limitations, I guess.
yeah. But I think the problem is if you spend a lot of money and then don't enjoy the playstyle, it's not like
Yeah,
with I think what you're alluding to, it's not like with like Gondor and Mordor, where like one of the advantages of a Mordor army is, if you go to all the pain of like, you get the Witch King, bunch of orcs and stuff like that, if you hate the Mordor playstyle and you want to switch it up, you can just drop that into Angmar and things like that. Like, there's no like those models serve multiple purposes. And like there are so many different models even within the Mordor army list, if you want to stick with it, that you can just use to change it up. Whereas, as you said, like Iron Hills, you're only really going to be doing one thing, and even if you ally it, I don't think its role can ever be like that flexible. It's always going to have that one thing, which is it's got Dane, it's got some sort of really solid elite troops, and you're not going to move very fast, and you're just going to try and get in there and grind people up, and that might get a little fatiguing if you play it too much.
Yeah, I would say so as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some lists. Now, this first list is one that I got from GW's army review. That they get the random intern to type up on the Thursday evening before they release it on the Friday.
No one checks it as well.
I think there's a couple of things wrong with this list. There's no banner, which I think is just
Oh god, yeah, I hadn't even noticed. Yeah, because you get a banner with the fucking captain,
Yeah,
don't you?
I
What
don't
the
understand.
fuck are they
I
thinking?
don't understand why there isn't a banner.
Why is there a random goat rider?
Yeah. I mean, up to you.
I would put a random goat rider in there, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
forego a fucking banner for it at this point level.
Yeah. I mean, is what it is. Like, don't take this list. You can take something not. You can take something
Take
like
this,
sim.
but take the goat rider out, and then take as many dwarves out as you need to add a banner. Because then all you need to buy is 2 boxes of dwarves, Dane, and the command pack.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you get the multi-pack, you get the banner and you get the captain in there you get included. So you don't even need to go and buy the command pack. So there's so much wrong with this post from GW's middle. I'll read the title: Middle Earth Faction Focus, Iron Hills Dwarf, 6th of July in 2023. What the fuck were they thinking? Anyway, moving on to the next one. There's also a lot wrong with this list, but you can't be rude about it because it's the one I took to a tournament. So this is why is this green? 500 points. Thrall, bunch of Kingsguard, 6 Warriors of Erebor, Shield and Spear, and Dane on Pig with 2 Goat Riders. Basically, this is the one I took to the Maelstrom thing. Basically, what I would do is Thrall goes down first, and then Dane uses the army bonus to come in wherever he wanted to.
I mean, I think it's fine from a fluffy perspective, isn't it? Because theoretically, Dane is still doing his thing when Thrall's around.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah.
It is a cool list.
Yeah.
Dane flanked by a couple goats. Don't need to buy any warriors.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and like I don't know, I think a lot of the reason you're taking Iron Hills is for Dane, and I think like a lot of reason you would take Thralls is for Thrall and for that 6-inch banner. So actually, like, I think this plays to the strength of both armies. But yeah, it's perhaps not fully optimized, but I think actually dwarf lists always have just some bad matchups where like your opponent can just outmaneuver you, get out of range, and things like that, and you are just going to struggle. So yeah, it's just a downside of playing dwarves, but also you do just have some matchups where you can just churn through people and there's not a whole lot they can do. So like, yeah, there's upsides and downsides.
Yep.
This is probably the most, well, I got this from Tell Me a Tale. Their
you know what
review.
This should be called?
What?
Where's the rest of my army? I can't believe this is all you can get for 700.
Yeah, it's on the small side. But yeah, you get Dane on Pig with a Goat Rider, 5 guys with Spear, 4 guys without, 1 guy with a banner. Well done, you need your banner, and then 2 Iron Hills with crossbow. Should be noted, this list does have 8 guys with crossbow, which I think, not saying they're wrong or right, like it's just more than I personally would take. I feel like I'd only take like 3 or 4, maybe that's too few actually. Maybe you do need 8 crossbows. Just feels like a big points commitment for a model that doesn't like necessarily fit with what the rest of your army is going to be doing.
Mm.
Tricky. But yeah, I couldn't find a picture of Iron Hill's captain on a goat because GW don't make the model, so that's he should be on a goat. But yeah, and then you got the blister in there as well, which I think is nice. I think part of the reason your model count will be lower is just that you got the blister in there, and it will cost you a lot of points. I mean, the nerf basically costs you not quite 3 guys, but like 2.5 guys, basically, doesn't it? So that does have an impact when your model count is as low as it is.
Got everything though. The list.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's a good all-round list. It is
Mm.
just surprisingly low model count.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of the point, right? That like actually at 600 points, you might just drop the ballista or something like that, and actually this army looks pretty
That's
good.
10 more models, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
have to get another captain at that point.
Yeah. Whereas I think by this point, at like 700 points plus, you're going to be coming against armies that do just have the tools to deal with you. Like as I said earlier, I think one of the biggest things you'd have to deal with is Danon magic, and he does only have 3 will. And if if they are able to transfix, compel, whatever to him, it does just like blunt a lot of what your a lot of your firepower, because he is like a wrecking ball against heroes or elite warriors and things like that, and I think that's what you want to be doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, what are your closing thoughts on Iron Hills as a faction? You've already said you wouldn't recommend it to newer players, but like, is there anything else that's springing to mind now? Like, I just don't really. I
I
don't know.
think
It's,
they're an army that I can imagine you having and using in combination with other armies. I think that's probably what's going to make it the most fun. You know, you can
yeah.
bring Erebor Reclaimed, you can bring Halls of Thranduil, you can bring
Mm,
Army of Lake Town, and that will help mix it up in the same way that I mean, imagine this as maybe a smaller part of a larger faction as opposed to its own thing. You know, it can be used as its own thing, but that might get old. I suppose you are going to be able to expand into those other factions if you did want to mix it up. So maybe it's not as Nuban friendly as I at first had thought. I think from a hobby perspective, it maybe isn't the best, but
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just a bit I feel underwhelmed having gone through this. Like I own Nine Hills, and I played a couple of practice games, used it at a tournament, and then I was like, actually, this is just a bit dull, and like I've never gone back to it since then. Like yeah, I don't know it. I think it's also has the problem of being a Hobbit faction, and I know this isn't fair, but like I just don't feel, as a result of the Hobbit movies, I don't feel much of an attachment to this. Whereas like you know, I'm sure people feel very like you're attached, like the Urukai, for instance, things like that. Like that's a cool faction and a cool theme. Whereas like I don't know, for this, it's just a little bit underwhelming.
they just appear for like 20 minutes, fuck
Yeah,
shit up. You
yeah,
don't really see much of them.
yeah.
They're
They
not
look a bit
particularly like
slurry.
menacing.
No.
Yeah, it's just like okay. I think you can make them cool in their own way. I guess like they are.
Yeah.
I think they are cool. You know, they are dwarves. The behind the sort of slight silliness
Mm.
is these like hardcore weathered dwarves. I'm sure if you know if you read about them and read about their lore and stuff, they'd probably be a lot cooler than they seem
Yeah.
in The Hobbit, for example. So maybe just choose to take your inspiration from those sources as opposed to the movie so much.
It's a shame that the sculpts are based on the movies.
Yeah,
So you can't really get away from
it's
it.
true.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that'll do. Thank you very much for watching. This has been a sort of a slightly subdued army review of the Iron Hills faction. I think our unfortunate conclusion of like before you buy is maybe look elsewhere first and then come back to this later. But it's not a bad
Yeah,
faction, and I'm sure there will be definitely lots of people out there who enjoy it. So yeah, that's all
yeah.
right.
Maybe dabble in it a bit as opposed
Yeah.
to making it your only thing.
don't fully invest in like a full like 700 or 800 point list before trying it out first, because it might be
No.
that it's your cup of tea. Cool. Right. Well, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Mare.
Goodbye, everyone.
Like and subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff.
Well,
Peace.
the energy's really plummeted.
I don't know. I just hit the wall there. I was just like, oh god, I just don't like this faction.